There are zombie shows that want to scare you, zombie shows that want to gross you out. And then there's Never Shall Death Do Us Part, which is sitting in the corner with red eyes like, hey, what if the monster is still the person you love? And I'm telling you right now, I did not expect to be sitting there, shoulders up by my ears, feeling genuinely tender about a story where the central relationship problem is one of them is technically dead. This is Flick Flare. And yes, I watched the whole thing with that exact mix of dread and devotion you get when a drama is clearly about to hurt you. But it's doing it so beautifully, you keep leaning closer. Also, quick, soft ask before we get messy. If you like long-form drama reviews that actually sit inside the emotions instead of speedrunning plot, consider subscribing. I'll be talking spoilers in a moderate way here. Like, I'm going to dig into the premise, the big emotional turns, some key confrontations, what the show is doing with its themes. But I'm not going to blow the final stretch like a confetti cannon. You can still watch the series with fresh nerves. Because the premise is already a punch, right? Outbreak hits, a couple gets torn apart, she turns, but she doesn't lose herself. She keeps her mind, she keeps her love. And he refuses to accept that she's gone. Narrative the world is trying to hand him like a pamphlet. When they reunite, he holds her without fear, disguises her as human, and they go hunting for a cure through betrayal and despair. That sounds like a logline you've heard variations of, sure, but the way this show commits to that central question, what does love look like when the body is wrong? That's what got under my skin. And I want to say this upfront, I ended up loving this drama. Not in a brain-off, that was fun way. In a frustrating, aching, sometimes I wanted to yell at the screen way. It's not perfect, and it's not trying to be polite about its pain. But it's one of those stories that feels like it has a pulse, even when the world doesn't. The first thing it does really well is establish the relationship as a real, lived-in thing before it starts tearing it apart. Not with a cheesy montage, not with the usual look, they're happy shorthand. It's in the little behaviors, the way they read each other's faces, the tiny corrections in conversation that only couples do, where you can hear years of shared language. The show understands that if you want the audience to believe in a love strong enough to carry a corpse, you can't fake the foundation. You have to let us feel the weight of what's being lost. And then the outbreak arrives with this ugly, indifferent momentum. One of my favorite choices the series makes is how it treats the disaster not like an event, but like a weather system. It rolls in, it changes everything. It doesn't care who you are. The camera language supports that. When things start breaking, the framing gets less romantic and more utilitarian. Like the show stops trying to compose the world and starts trying to survive it. It's not just shaky cam chaos for the sake of it. Their intention in the panic. But here's where it gets interesting, because plenty of zombie dramas can do panic. The hook isn't the gore. The hook is the moment you realize she's turned, and she's still in there, still seeing him, still feeling, still choosing. Let me slow down and actually sit in that for a second, because this is the emotional engine of the whole series. A lot of stories use infected but conscious as a gimmick. Like, oh, look at the tragic monster. This drama treats it like a daily negotiation. She's not just trapped in a body with a hunger, she's trapped in other people's expectations of what a zombie is allowed to be. And the show keeps asking, if the world says you're a thing to be put down, what does it take to insist you're still a person? And the boyfriend, God, the boyfriend, could have been written as the standard stubborn hero. But what I appreciated is that his refusal to let her die isn't portrayed as simple strength. It's messy. It's denial and devotion twisted together so tight you can't separate them. Sometimes it looks noble. Sometimes it looks selfish. Sometimes it looks like the only reason either of them is still moving. If you're waiting for the series to make it easy on you with moral clarity, it does not. And that's the first reason I knew I was in trouble emotionally. Because the show doesn't let you sit comfortably in, I would do the right thing. It keeps drifting toward, okay, but what if it was you? Now, I'm going to talk about a scene early on that basically told me what kind of drama this was without giving away anything too specific. There's a reunion moment, and it's not staged like a triumph. It's staged like a dare. The atmosphere is tight, sound design narrowing, like the world is holding its breath. You can hear small, human sounds, fabric shifting, a swallowed breath, more than you hear the horror of it. And when he finally closes the distance, when he wraps his arms around her, the show doesn't play it like, look how brave. It plays it like, look how inevitable. His body moves before his brain catches up, because love is sometimes a reflex. And that's romantic, yes, but it's also terrifying, because you're sitting there thinking, please don't let this be the moment it turns into a tragedy. That tension becomes the series' signature flavor. It keeps building intimacy inside danger. Hand-holding that feels like contraband. Eye contact that feels like a risk assessment. The way they stand slightly angled from each other, like they're always prepared to either embrace or bolt. And can we talk about the disguising harassment element? Because on paper, it could have been silly. The wrong show would treat it like a gimmick. Hats, sunglasses, nobody will notice. Here, it lands more like a metaphor you can touch. Her passing becomes this constant, exhausting performance. The series uses that to explore how survival often demands acting, and how intimacy can become this private space where you don't have to perform. There's something brutal about the idea that the only place she can relax her face is in front of the one person who can get her killed just by loving her out loud. So when the story starts pushing them into wider groups, into systems, into factions, whatever shape those take, it isn't just plot escalation. It's pressure testing. Love in a vacuum is one thing. Love in a world where people are starving, scared, armed, and looking for someone to blame, that's where you find out what you're actually made of. Here's a question that kept nagging at me as I watched. If she has her mind and she has her love, what exactly is the cure supposed to fix? Her body? The hunger? Or the way the world refuses to recognize her humanity? Because the show is smart enough to let that question sit there like a stone in your shoe. Performance-wise, the actress playing her has the harder job, in my opinion. She has to live in this in-between state without turning it into a caricature. And what she does, at least from how it played to me, is controlled restraint. She doesn't go big and monstrous. She goes precise, like she's constantly monitoring herself. The angle of her smile, the speed of her movements, the intensity of her gaze. There's this sense that she's doing math all the time. How human can I seem? How safe can I make him feel? How much hunger can I swallow before it shows? And then, in private moments, she lets little cracks appear. Not melodrama. Just a fraction too long staring at someone's throat, then blinking it away like she's ashamed. Or the way her hands flex when she's trying not to reach for something. Those details are what make it convincing. That's what makes it sad. Because it's not, I'm a monster now. It's, I have to work so hard to stay me. The actor playing him does something that I always respect in a romantic lead. He lets himself look unglamorous in love. You know what I mean? Not just brooding hero. He looks exhausted. His eyes are always scanning, always calculating distance and exits. And then when he looks at her, his face softens in a way that almost pisses you off because it's so vulnerable. Like, sir, you cannot be this tender in a world like this. That's how you die. And yet, that's also the point. There's a particular kind of physical acting that carries their dynamic. When they're alone, they drift closer like magnets. When they're around others, there's always a tiny gap. And you can see the effort it takes to maintain it. That gap becomes its own character. It's the space where lies live. It's the space where fear might leak out. It's the space where he has to pretend he's not in love with something everyone else would shoot on sight. And the show uses that physicality to keep you tense without constantly throwing zombies at you. Honestly, that's one of the more mature choices here. The action exists, sure, but it's not the only lever. Sometimes the most stressful sequences are quiet ones. walking through a crowded area, trying to keep her covered, trying to keep her calm, trying not to flinch if someone gets too close. That's good suspense because it's character-based. It's not random. It's earned. Wait, because this is where the show starts slipping its real themes into your pocket, like a note you don't read until later. The zombies aren't just monsters. They're a social line. They're a category. And once you're categorized, people stop listening to your words. They only listen to their fear. A thing I didn't expect to appreciate as much as I did is the series' visual palette. It's not just grey apocalypse. There are stretches where the color drains. Yeah, but then you'll get these pockets of warmth, lamplight, sunrise, a room with old wallpaper still clinging to a past life. The show seems really interested in the contrast between a dead world and the stubborn little beautiful things still sitting inside it. And sometimes the camera lingers on those details, like it's trying to convince itself the world is still worth saving. The editing rhythm also does something subtle. It lets emotional beats breathe. Modern genre dramas can get so scared of stillness that they cut away the second a face starts doing something interesting. Here, the show will hold on a reaction half a second longer than you expect, which is exactly where you see the character swallow a feeling. Those half seconds add up. They're the difference between a plot and a relationship. The music, when it shows up, is used like a bruise. Not constant, not manipulative. More like it arrives after the moment when your body's already reacting, and then it underlines what you didn't want to admit you felt. There are scenes that would be easy to score as horror, and the show chooses something mournful instead. And that choice tells you, over and over, this is not a story about monsters. It's a story about grief that refuses to behave. Now, let's get into the betrayal and despair side of the storyline, because this is where the series could have easily become a soap opera with zombies. Together they seek a cure through betrayal, and despair is a big, dramatic promise. And the show largely pays it off by making betrayal feel personal rather than plotty. It's not just someone double-crossed them because the writers needed a twist. The betrayals grow out of the world's logic. Scarcity, fear, ideology, self-preservation. And the worst part is you can usually understand why the betrayer did it, even when you hate them for it. There's also a really interesting undercurrent about what people will do for a cure and what they'll justify. Because a cure isn't just medicine in this story, it's power, it's status, it's permission. The idea that someone could control who gets to be human again is basically a loaded gun on the table. And the show knows it. It leans into the ugliness of that. And I know some viewers will want the drama to be faster, meaner, more action-forward. But I'm going to offer a slightly contrarian take. I actually respect that it slows down to make the romance complicated instead of purely aspirational. Because if you really think about it, the fantasy version of this story is love conquers all and everybody claps. The honest version is love makes you do insane things, and sometimes those insane things hurt other people. The show lets that be true without turning the couple into villains. That said, it does flirt with melodrama at points. There are moments where you can feel the writers pushing the pain button a little too eagerly. Like, yes, we get it. The world is cruel. You don't have to dunk their heads under every single episode. But even then, the performances usually drag it back into something grounded. And I want to talk about the she keeps her mind aspect again, because the writing uses it to explore consent and autonomy in a really uncomfortable, compelling way. If she's conscious, then decisions about her body are not abstract. When other characters treat her like an object, like a sample, a threat, a bargaining chip, it lands with a particular kind of violation. And when he protects her, it can be tender, but it can also shade into control. The show doesn't always call that out explicitly, but it lets you feel the tension. It lets you sit there and wonder, is he protecting her because he respects her, or because he can't survive the idea of losing her? Those are not the same thing, and the story knows it. Here's another question that kept me watching through the bleak parts. How long can you hide someone you love before the hiding becomes its own kind of harm? Because hiding is a relationship dynamic, too. It changes how you talk. It changes what you confess. It changes what you ask for. It creates this constant low-grade panic that seeps into every decision. And the show is good at making that panic feel embodied. Not just they're in danger. More like they're carrying danger inside their intimacy. There's a stretch, more in the mid-season territory, keeping it vague, where the series starts to widen its scope. You feel the world getting bigger, the systems getting clearer, the rules of survival solidifying. And with that comes the sense that the couple's love story is not happening in a corner anymore. It's becoming a problem for other people. And that's when the drama gets juicier, because love is easy to root for when it's private. Love becomes complicated when it has consequences. One of the most effective bits of directing is how it stages conversations about her without her. People arguing in doorways. Hushed voices behind thin walls. Someone standing guard like she's a prisoner, even if they're calling it protection. And then the show will cut to her listening, very still, face unreadable. And you realize the real horror isn't the infection. It's being present while people debate whether you deserve to exist. There's a moment that hit me harder than I expected, and I'm going to talk around it rather than spoil specifics. She's in a situation where she has to act normal under scrutiny, and the scene is shot with this tight, almost suffocating closeness. The sound drops out in a way that makes you feel her focus narrowing. Someone asks something simple, an everyday question, and she answers like she's reciting lines. Her eyes flick to her partner for half a beat, just to check, am I doing it right? And that glance, that tiny, quick, desperate glance, is what broke me. Because it's love, yeah, but it's also humiliation. Imagine having to ask the person you love with your eyes if you're still allowed to be a person. And I'm not even going to pretend I was emotionally normal watching this, because it hit a very specific nerve for me. That theme of passing, of performing acceptable humanity, of being constantly vigilant about not making other people uncomfortable with what you are. It's not hard to connect that to real life. Whether you're talking about illness, disability, grief, queerness, trauma, just being different in a way the room doesn't have patience for. That feeling of editing yourself for safety is real. And seeing it literalized in a zombie body, but played with sincerity, made me weirdly angry in a good way. Like, yes, that's what it feels like. Thank you for not making it a joke. And then, because it's a drama, it doesn't let you stay in that quiet hurt. It keeps pushing. It throws them into scenarios where doing the right thing and doing the loving thing are suddenly at odds. Sometimes the show frames that as a moral dilemma. Sometimes it frames it as a logistical problem. But it always comes back to the same ache. If love is the thing keeping you alive, what happens when love becomes the thing that endangers everyone else? The zombie elements themselves are handled with a pretty grounded tone. It's not trying to reinvent the creature design in some flashy way, at least not from what the premise suggests and how the series feels overall. It's more about behavior than spectacle. The infected are frightening because they are familiar shapes moving wrong, because the sound of them is wrong, because the show uses distance and obstruction. Have seen movement through glass, a silhouette at the end of a hallway. So your brain fills in the worst possibility. And when violence happens, it isn't stylized as fun. It's ugly. It leaves marks on the characters. It changes the way they carry themselves. I will say, though, there are a couple points where the series risks making the world feel a little too convenient for the central couple. Like, the plot sometimes bends just enough to keep them together that you can feel the writer's hands. But the reason I forgive it is because the show is honest about the cost. It doesn't give them together for free. Every time they manage a small win, one more day, one more safe room, one more lead on a cure, there's a price. It's exhausting in a way that feels intentional. You're meant to feel worn down. You're meant to understand why despair becomes a character. And speaking of despair, the show's tone doesn't just wallow. It uses despair as contrast. When a tender moment appears, it lands like water in your mouth after a long run. The series understands that hope in a hopeless world can't be constant, or it stops feeling true. Hope has to be rare enough to be precious. But let's get into the boyfriend's psychology a bit more, because he's the one who could have become annoying if written wrong. The refuses to believe she's dead trope can turn a protagonist into a stubborn wall. Here, his refusal is not just denial, it's a worldview. If he admits she's gone, he has to admit the world is the kind of place that takes her. And once you admit that, what's left to fight for? He's not just searching for her. He's searching for proof that meaning can survive catastrophe. The drama also plays with the idea of recognition. Like, does he recognize her as her because she's behaving like herself? Because she remembers him? Because she loves him? Or because he needs her to be her? And in the moments where she falters, where the infection asserts itself in some small way, you see this flicker in him. Not disgust, not fear, something worse. Grief trying to get in through the cracks. There's a particular kind of intimacy that comes from caretaking, and the show leans into that. Feeding becomes charged. Cleaning wounds becomes charged. Even just watching her sleep, if she even sleeps the way humans do anymore, becomes this vigil that looks romantic until you realize it's also surveillance. The line between tenderness and control is thin, and the show keeps walking it like a tightrope. And here's where I'm going to make another slightly surprising argument. I don't think the series is purely about love conquers death. I think it's also about how love can trap you in the past. Because his mission to find her and cure her is, in a way, a refusal to accept change. And the show keeps hinting quietly that even if they succeed, they won't get back to what they were. The best they can hope for is something new, something altered. And that's a terrifying prospect for anyone who's ever wanted to rewind time. So when the plot starts dangling the cure, the show is careful not to make it feel like a shiny quest item. It's not just get cure, win. It's what are you willing to do to deserve it? And who gets to decide what deserve even means? There's an undercurrent of judgment in the world around them. People have opinions about their love, about her existence, about his refusal to let her go. And that judgment becomes its own kind of threat. Every time a new person enters their orbit, you can feel the couple doing that internal calculation. Friend, threat, resource, liability. And the show often shoots these meetings with a kind of subtle adversarial blocking. Someone stands just a little too close. Someone else keeps their hands visible. A smile that doesn't reach the eyes. You can tell the director understands that in a collapsed world, social interaction is combat with manners. Let me not forget to mention how the series uses silence, because that's one of its secret weapons. There are stretches when nobody says the obvious thing. Nobody says, "I'm scared you'll eat me." Nobody says, "I'm scared I'll lose myself." They talk around it. They talk logistics. They talk plans. But their bodies say the real dialogue. A hand hovering, not touching. A flinch that gets swallowed. A breath held when someone walks past. And that silence feels real, because in trauma, people often don't narrate their feelings. They manage them. One of the reasons the romance works, for me, is that she's not written as just a symbol. She's not merely the infected girlfriend. She has agency. She makes choices. She sometimes pushes back. Sometimes she's the one who's braver. Sometimes she's the one who's more pragmatic. And that matters, because a love story like this can accidentally become a savior narrative where he's the hero and she's the burden. This drama flirts with that dynamic, but it also complicates it. She saves him emotionally as much as he saves her physically. Sometimes she's the only reason he doesn't turn into an animal. Now, I will admit, there were moments where I had to laugh. Not because it's funny, but because the situation gets so intense that my brain does that pressure release thing. Like when the disguise element is at its most nerve-wracking. And I found myself thinking, I swear if somebody asks her to do some normal human small talk right now, I'm going to pass away. And then, of course, the show does something like that. It knows exactly where your nerves are. Okay, but the real heat of the drama comes when the outside world starts reflecting their inside conflict. The betrayal angle isn't just about plot twists. It's about the fact that everyone is betraying something. People betray their old morals, their old relationships, their promises, even their own sense of who they are. Survival is betrayal sometimes. And the show is not shy about that, and has a quiet craft thing I really admired. The series doesn't always telegraph who's going to hurt you. It doesn't slap villain music on someone the minute they walk in. It lets people be charming. It lets them be helpful. It lets you relax just a little. And then later, when a choice is made that wrecks someone's trust, it feels like an actual betrayal, not a scripted necessity. If you're someone who watches dramas for chemistry, you're going to have a lot to chew on here. Their chemistry isn't flirty. It's not banter forward. It's that deeper, more dangerous kind where you believe they would burn the world down for each other, and you're not sure whether to swoon or call for help. The show doesn't pretend that's healthy. It just admits it's real. And I need to highlight the way the series frames touch as a language. Because touch is the entire argument. If he can touch her without fear, he's declaring her human. If he can hold her in public, if he ever dares, it's a political statement. If she flinches away, it's not just sadness, it's self-protection. There are scenes where their hands meet for half a second, and the shot treats it like a kiss. That's smart romance writing. That's scarcity, making everything matter. So the story keeps moving them forward, step by step, into deeper risk. You feel the world tightening around them. The cure becomes less like hope and more like obsession. And the farther they go, the more the drama starts asking whether love is enough. Or whether love is simply the reason they're willing to do unforgivable things. And right around when you think you understand the show's rhythm, danger, tenderness, it starts bending that rhythm. It begins setting up situations where the tenderness itself becomes dangerous, where being seen loving each other is the trigger for consequences. And that's when the tension stops being just, will they survive? And becomes, what will survival turn them into? And that's when the tension stops being just, will they survive? And becomes, what will survival turn them into? Because once you accept that she's still herself in there, the show basically removes the easy moral exits. You can't just go, well, infected are infected. You can't hide behind genre law. Every decision becomes personal. If you kill an infected person who's lucid, what do you just do? If you spare them and they hurt someone later, what do you just do? The drama keeps hovering around those questions like a fly you can't swat away. And I loved it for that, even when it made me feel kind of sick. There's a mid-story shift where the disguise stops feeling like a clever plan and starts feeling like a cage. Not because the idea is bad, but because of what it does to them emotionally. He's always watching for signs she'll slip. She's always watching for signs he'll flinch. And the world around them is always watching for any excuse to label somebody other. The show nails that paranoia. You start noticing how often the camera frames them through barriers. Cracked windows, chain link, door frames, gaps between bodies in a crowd. It's like the series is visually reminding you, over and over, that their love is always separated from safety by something thin and temporary. And here's where I'm going to be honest. I don't usually get moved by apocalypse romance. I'll enjoy it, sure, but it's rarely the thing that makes me pause the episode and just sit there in silence for a minute. This one did, because it isn't just romance. It's the specific kind of love that forms when you're both looking at the same cliff edge and deciding, together, to keep walking anyway. That hit me in a way that felt uncomfortably close to real life, actually. I've had relationships where the world wasn't ending, but the anxiety felt like it was. That constant scanning for danger, for rejection, for the moment things turn. Watching these to try to build a tiny pocket of peace inside chaos, I felt that old tightness in my chest, like my body remembered it before my brain did. Wait, Because the cure quest isn't even the real quest for a long time. The real quest is recognition. It's him saying, I see you, and her believing him. It's her saying, I'm still here, and him not turning that into a fantasy. The cure is just the external shape of that longing, and the drama is patient enough to let that be the core. Which is why when betrayal and despair start stacking up, it doesn't feel like random misery. It feels like the world specifically targeting that recognition, trying to pry it apart with crowbars. You can feel the writers playing with how people use science, religion, and ideology as survival stories. Some characters cling to rules because rules make fear manageable. If zombies are always monsters, then you can kill them and sleep. If an infected person can still be a person, then suddenly you have to grieve and think and take responsibility. And a lot of people don't want that. They want clean categories. This drama keeps presenting those categories and then poisoning them. There's a really sharp bit of character writing in how the boyfriend reacts to other survivors. When people want to help, he doesn't relax. He tightens. He's like an animal that's been chased too long. Kindness is suspicious. And the show doesn't romanticize that either. It shows how trauma makes you paranoid, and paranoia makes you cruel. And cruelty makes you isolated. And isolation makes you more paranoid. It's a loop. And the only thing breaking that loop for him is her, which is sweet, but also dangerous. Because if your entire emotional regulation system is one person, and that person is constantly at risk, you're basically living with a grenade in your ribcage. The actress playing her does this thing with her voice that I kept noticing. It's slightly measured, slightly careful, like she's always calibrating how much emotion is safe to show. And then, in private, her voice drops into something warmer, more relaxed, and you realize she's been holding tension in her throat the whole time. It's such a small choice, but it's the kind of choice that makes the performance feel lived in. She's not acting zombie. She's acting woman pretending she isn't a zombie while trying not to lose her mind. That's a completely different energy. And the makeup and styling, again, keeping it general, because the series doesn't hinge on any one specific look, feels intentionally restrained. It's not trying to do the most. It's trying to do the most believable. The show wants you to look at her and see her first, the infection second. So you get these subtle signs: pallor, a faint wrongness in the eyes, a tension in the jaw, the way she holds her body like she's bracing against an internal pull. It's enough to keep the danger present without turning her into a Halloween prop. You know what really sells the intimacy, though? The sound design. There are scenes where the world is loud, distant screams, shuffling footsteps, metal clanging, the hum of makeshift generators, that kind of texture. And then when they get alone, the sound narrows down to little human things. Breathing, cloth, a chair creaking, skin against skin. It's like the show is saying, here, this is what they're trying to protect. Not life in the big heroic sense. Just these tiny, ordinary sounds that mean you're still human. So when betrayal hits, and it does, in different forms, it lands like a violation of that private soundscape. Suddenly, the world barges in again. Suddenly, you're hearing boots and doors and harsh voices. And it's jarring because the show has trained you to associate quiet with safety. That's good craft. That's manipulation, but it's earned manipulation. Let's talk about Betrayal, because the premise straight up promises it. And the drama doesn't treat betrayal like a mustache-twirling thing. It treats it like a survival tactic. Someone lies because they think they're preventing panic. Someone sells someone out because they're terrified. Someone withholds information because knowledge is leverage. And the cure, whether it's real, rumored, partial, weaponized, whatever shape it takes in the narrative, becomes the ultimate leverage point. People don't just want to live. They want to be the one who gets to decide who lives. There's a point where you start realizing the boyfriend's love is not just a feeling, it's a threat to other people's order. If you admit that an infected person can be safe, can be conscious, can be loved, then the whole social contract of "we kill them on sight" collapses. And people will defend their social contract with violence. The show makes that disturbingly plausible. It's not just fear of being bitten. It's fear of being morally wrong. Fear of having to reframe everything you've already done. Here's a rehook that kept me watching through the bleakest stretches. What happens if the cure exists, but it's not accessible? Or was, what happens if it's accessible, but only if you sacrifice something you can't get back? The show keeps flirting with that kind of bargain, and you can feel the characters approaching it like sleepwalkers. One of the most effective mini arcs in the middle is how the series handles the couple's internal negotiations. Because you think the main conflict would be external. Zombies, other survivors, the quest for a cure. But a lot of the drama is actually them renegotiating their relationship in this new reality. What does consent look like when she has a hunger she didn't ask for? What does trust look like when he's disguising her and sometimes making decisions fast that affect her body and her life? What does honesty look like when honesty can get her executed? And the show doesn't do that thing where it turns every conflict into a screaming match. Thank God. It lets them be quiet with each other. It lets them be stubborn in small ways. It lets resentment show up like a shadow instead of a monologue. There's a kind of intimacy in watching two people argue with their eyes because they can't afford to raise their voices. And those are the scenes where the chemistry feels the most real to me. Love isn't just declarations. It's negotiation. It's compromises you're not proud of. It's choosing each other again when you're tired. The boyfriend has to become someone he might hate in a different life. He has to lie constantly. He has to be willing to hurt people before they hurt her. He has to treat strangers like potential executioners. That changes you. And the show lets you see that change. His face gets harder. His decisions get quicker. The softness becomes something he only allows himself in tiny doses, like a drug he's rationing. Meanwhile, she's dealing with the opposite transformation. She has to become smaller, quieter, less visible. She has to flatten her personality so she doesn't draw attention. That's such a cruel mirror. He becomes sharper to protect her. She becomes duller to survive. And the drama doesn't romanticize that sacrifice. It shows how it erodes her, how it makes her question whether she's still living or just being carried. And I'm going to say something that might annoy some fans who just want the romance to be pure. I actually love that the show doesn't let their love be clean. It's messy. It's complicated. It has power dynamics. It has moments where you can feel her frustration at being hidden, at being managed, even if she understands why. It has moments where you can feel his terror turning into possessiveness. The drama doesn't turn them into villains for that, but it also doesn't pretend devotion can't become controlling. That honesty is a big part of why I ended up respecting it. Now, there's a specific kind of scene the show keeps coming back to, and it's basically its signature suspense device, the almost exposure, the almost slip, the almost bite, the almost recognition. And it's always shot like a heartbeat. Tight close-ups, shallow focus, the background blurring into threat. You'll see her jaw tense. You'll see his hand subtly move like he's ready to grab her wrist, not violently, but urgently. And sometimes the music goes away entirely, leaving you with that horrible clarity of quiet. It's like being in a room where everyone is pretending nothing is wrong, and you're the only one who knows a single mistake will get someone killed. Those scenes work because the drama has built enough trust that you believe the consequences. You believe they can't talk their way out. You believe the world is cruel enough to do the worst thing. That's how suspense should function. It's not about surprise. It's about inevitability. Wait, because the series also does something sneaky. It makes you complicit. It makes you root for the lie. You find yourself praying, please don't let anyone notice. Please let her pass. Please let them get through this. And then later you step back and realize you've been rooting for a deception that, in another context, would be morally dubious. You're rooting for someone to live by hiding what they are. And the show doesn't scold you for that. It just quietly makes you aware of it. That's the kind of genre storytelling I live for. Let's talk cinematography a bit more, because the show's look is doing emotional work. It uses distance to communicate isolation. Wide shots where the couple is small against a ruined landscape, like they're two little pieces on a board that doesn't care. And then it switches to claustrophobic close-ups when the danger becomes social. When the threat is people might see her, the frame tightens like a noose. That visual grammar becomes intuitive after a while. You feel the story shifting gears through the lens, not just the dialogue. Lighting is also a big deal here. It's not just dark because apocalypse. It's dark in a way that suggests hiding. Shadows that feel protective and suffocating at the same time. There are moments where lamplight hits her face and makes her look almost normal, almost like the old world. And you can see him relax for a split second. And then someone moves, the light shifts, and the infection shows again. That flicker is basically the show's whole emotional thesis. Normal is not stable anymore. You can't hold it. It slips. The editing, too, has this interesting relationship with memory. Even when the show doesn't explicitly do flashbacks, keeping it vague, it has this tendency to cut on emotion rather than action. Like it will linger on his expression after he's done something morally questionable, and then cut to a quieter moment where he's with her, as if to say, this is why he did it. Not to excuse him, to contextualize him. That's a mature approach to character, and it's one of the reasons I didn't get bored even when the plot slowed down. But I can already hear the counter-argument. Okay, but do they overdo the despair? And sometimes the show piles on suffering so consistently that you start to feel numb. There's a fine line between this world is brutal and the writers are addicted to punishing their characters. And there are moments where I felt that line wobble. Like, I wanted a little more variety in the emotional weather. Not constant sunshine, just a different kind of storm. And yet, here's my contrarian take number 2. I think that exhaustion is partially the point. The show wants you to feel depleted because the characters are depleted. The romance isn't supposed to be escapist in a comfy way. It's supposed to be a test of endurance. If you're watching and you feel tired, that's not necessarily a failure. That's the show putting you in their shoes. I don't think every viewer will enjoy that, but I found it oddly immersive. Now, the series' best moments, for me, are when it allows the zombie concept to be a metaphor without turning into a lecture. Like, the show doesn't pause and go, this is about othering with a neon sign. It just tells a story where someone is treated like an object and you feel the horror of that. It tells a story where someone is forced to perform humanity to earn safety and you recognize that dread. It tells a story where love is judged by outsiders and you feel that pressure. The subtext stays subtext, but it's loud enough that you can't ignore it if you're paying attention. There's also a theme running through it about what counts as life. Is she alive if she's conscious? If she loves? If she remembers? The world wants to define life biologically because biology is measurable. The couple wants to define it relationally because relationship is what they have left. And the drama keeps letting those definitions clash. Not in philosophical speeches, thankfully, but in decisions, in violence, in the way people talk about her when they think she can't hear. And I want to give the show credit for not making all the humans the worst. It's easy in zombie media to go, humans are the real monsters, and then just make every survivor group a cartoon of cruelty. This drama, it has cruelty, for sure, but it also has fear and love and guilt and people trying and failing to be good. That nuance matters because it keeps the world from feeling like a theme park of misery. It feels like people who are hungry and terrified and grasping at certainty. A small thing I loved, the way the show uses objects as emotional anchors. Like, there are moments where a mundane item, something from before, becomes a symbol of who they were. And you'll see one of them touch it, or hide it, or hold it a little too long. The camera notices. It treats these items like relics. And in a world where everything is survival, those relics become proof that they used to be softness, that they didn't always live like this, that the current brutality is not their natural state, even if it's becoming their habit. Wait, because the series is also quietly asking, if you survive long enough, does brutality become your identity? Or is identity the thing you keep choosing in spite of brutality? That's what makes the Cure quest interesting. It's not just about her body. It's about whether they can keep being themselves while chasing salvation. Let me retell another kind of scene the show does incredibly well, because it captures the vibe. Picture a dim interior, that grey-blue light that comes right before dawn. The air looks cold, like you can almost see breath. They're huddled close, not even fully embracing, just sharing warmth, because bodies are the only heater left. She's sitting very still, eyes open, listening to sounds outside. Distant, irregular, that unsettling rhythm of a world that doesn't sleep anymore. He's half asleep, hand resting on her arm, and you can see the tension even in his rest, like his muscles never fully let go. Then a sound, not even a dramatic bang, just a small scrape. His eyes snap open immediately. No confusion, no grogginess. He's awake like a switch flipped. He looks at her first, not the door. That's the tell. He checks her face like he's asking, "Are you okay? Are you still you? Are you hungry? Are you about to run?" And she gives him this micro expression, this tiny, steadying nod, like, "I'm here. I've got me." And only then does he move. And the beauty is, nothing happens. Not in a plot sense. The sound passes. The danger doesn't crash in. But your heart is pounding anyway, because the scene isn't about the scrape. It's about the reflex. It's about the way his first instinct is not self-preservation. It's her preservation. And it's about the way she's learning to reassure him, not with words, but with presence. That's their relationship now. A constant, silent exchange of, "I'm still here. Don't let go. Not yet." That's the level of emotional specificity the show keeps offering. And it's why I stayed invested even when the narrative leaned into bleakness. It's not just doom. It's doom with texture. Now, the Cure pursuit introduces this fascinating push-pull between hope and exploitation. Because in any apocalypse narrative, the idea of a cure becomes currency. People will say anything to get it. They'll promise safety. They'll offer alliances. They'll use it to recruit followers. And the show is at its best when it portrays the cure not as a plot device, but as a myth people build structures around. Like, even if you never see the cure, the belief in it shapes behavior. It makes people betray. It makes people risk. It makes people justify atrocities as for the greater good. And in the middle of that, the couple's love story becomes almost embarrassingly sincere. Like, everyone else is playing chess, and these two are just trying to keep one person from being murdered by fear. That sincerity could have made them feel naive. But the show avoids that by making them intelligent, adaptable. They're not oblivious. They just have a different priority. And that's what makes the story emotionally sharp. Their love isn't a delusion. It's a choice. A choice that costs them again and again. There are also some really compelling moments of role reversal, where she becomes the steadier one. Because if you think about it, she's already crossed the threshold everyone else is afraid of. She's already died in a social sense. She's already lost her place in the human category. That gives her a clarity other characters don't have. Sometimes she's the one saying, "We can't keep chasing this like it's the only thing that matters." Sometimes she's the one reminding him that he's still alive, and he gets to choose what kind of person he is. Those are the moments where you realize she's not just an object of rescue. She's the story's moral compass, even if that compass is cracked. And I want to bring up the idea of fear because the boyfriend's fear is so interestingly portrayed. It's not fear of her, most of the time. It's fear for her, fear of himself, fear that he'll fail, fear that he's already failed and he just hasn't accepted it yet. That fear manifests as urgency, as controlling behavior, as risky decisions. And the actor sells it with this constant tightness around the eyes, like he hasn't slept in months. When he smiles, it looks like it hurts his face, like his muscles forgot how to do it. The show's pacing in this middle stretch can feel like a slow tightening rather than a series of spikes. It's less big set piece and more pressure increasing. And if you're the kind of viewer who needs frequent adrenaline, you might struggle. But if you like dread that accumulates, this show is basically custom built for you. It's the dread of waiting for a lie to collapse. The dread of knowing somebody will notice the wrong detail. The dread of loving someone in a world where love is a liability. Wait, because the show is also quietly building toward a question it can't avoid. If the cure exists, does she want it? And does he want it for her or for himself? And what if the cure costs her something she values? Her mind, her memories, her autonomy? The drama flirts with these possibilities without spelling everything out immediately. And that suspense is psychological, not just plotty. One of the more heartbreaking things is how the series depicts her internal loneliness. Even with him. Especially with him, sometimes. Because he loves her, but he also represents what she's lost. Normalcy, acceptance, ease. Being around him can remind her of who she used to be. And that's both comforting and painful. The show gives her moments of staring at her hands, at her reflection, at the way her body moves now. And you can see her mourning herself. Not just mourning her life, but mourning her ease. Mourning the version of her that didn't have to think about hunger every second. And I appreciate that the show doesn't make her constantly noble about it. She has moments of anger, of bitterness, of why me? Energy. And those moments are important because tragedy without anger is fake. If you don't rage against it at least once, did you even understand what was taken from you? The boyfriend's arc, on the other hand, is about learning the difference between saving someone and honoring them. And he struggles with that. You can feel him wanting to push the story toward cure and everything is okay because that's a story he can tolerate. The actual story, where she might never be fixed, where she might still be her, but not in the way he remembers, terrifies him. So he clings harder. And the show makes you watch that cling turn into decisions that are not always admirable. There's a sequence later in the middle stretch where the couple is forced into proximity with people who don't know the truth. And the show builds the tension through tiny, ordinary interactions. Somebody offers food. Somebody cracks a joke. Somebody asks where they're from. All harmless. But every word is a landmine because she has to respond like a human who's lived a normal human timeline. And the show lets those harmless moments be the scariest ones because they're where the lie has to work. The direction in those scenes is so good at making you aware of eyes. People's eyes flicking toward her. People's eyes lingering on her skin, her posture, her stillness. The camera sometimes adopts the perspective of an observer and you feel the scrutiny. It's like being under fluorescent lights when you want darkness. And then it will snap back to a close-up of her. And you'll see the effort in her face as she keeps her expression neutral. I'm going to make a small, self-aware aside here because I caught myself doing it. I started watching other characters the way the boyfriend watches them. Like, I'd see someone step a little too close to her and my whole body would tense. Which is ridiculous because I'm on my couch. But that's what good tension does. It rewires your attention. It makes you complicit in the vigilance. The show also understands that despair isn't just sadness. Despair is decision fatigue. Despair is numbness. Despair is laughing at something that isn't funny because your nervous system can't handle one more tragedy. The series sprinkles in those little moments where the characters' emotional responses don't match the situation in a neat way. Someone goes quiet after a near-death moment instead of crying. Someone gets irritated over something petty because it's safer than acknowledging grief. Those details make the world feel psychologically true. Wait, because there's a bigger idea under all of this. The outbreak isn't just destroying society, it's destroying narratives. The story people tell themselves about who they are, what they deserve, what love means, what alive means. And in that trouble, these two are trying to build a narrative sturdy enough to stand. She's still here. We can fix this. We can make it. And the drama keeps asking, which narratives keep you alive? And which ones keep you trapped? Another element I want to highlight is how the show handles physical space. Safe spaces are never truly safe, but they still matter. A room with a door you can lock. A corner where you can talk quietly. A place with running water, even if it's temporary. The series treats these spaces with reverence, and then it violates them because it's a drama and it hates us. But that violation has purpose. It's reminding you that in this world, safety is a moment, not a location. And that's why the betrayals sting. Because betrayal is often a breach of space. Someone lets danger into the room. Someone reveals the truth to the wrong person. Someone decides that her life is negotiable. It's always about access. Who gets to be inside the circle and who gets pushed out. One of the show's strongest tools is the way it frames her as both vulnerable and powerful. Vulnerable because she's hunted. Powerful because she's not mindless. She's capable of making strategic choices. Capable of sacrifice. Capable of terrifying restraint. That restraint becomes a kind of heroism. Not the flashy kind where you swing an axe. The quiet kind where you don't. Where you choose not to hurt someone even when your body is screaming at you too. That's another place where the performance shines. The way she portrays hunger as something she carries, not something she becomes. It's in the eyes. The slight dilation. The breath catching. The way she focuses on something else to distract herself. It's almost like watching someone ride out a panic attack. And if you've ever been around addiction, or anxiety, or chronic pain, anything that's an internal force you have to negotiate with, it feels uncomfortably familiar. And the boyfriend's love becomes, at times, a kind of addiction too. Not in a romanticized, I can't live without you way, but in the sense that he uses her existence as proof that the world still has meaning. If she's gone, meaning collapses. That's a lot to put on one person. The show doesn't say that out loud like a therapy session. It just shows it through his choices. Through how far he goes. Through how little he seems to care about his own survival unless it connects to hers. Wait, because the drama starts teasing a very painful possibility. That even if they find a cure, the world might not let them use it. The world might not forgive. The world might not accept her even if she's fixed. And that's where the show becomes less about medicine and more about stigma. About how people remember what you were. How people will always be waiting for you to slip back into the category they're comfortable hating. There's something almost tragic romantic in how the show portrays them as fugitives, not just from zombies, but from certainty. They live in a gray zone. And gray zones are where humans get uncomfortable. People want yes or no, alive or dead, safe or dangerous, human or monster. This couple refuses to answer cleanly, just by existing. And so the world keeps trying to force an answer out of them with violence. The series also has a strong sense of texture, which I know sounds like such a film nerd thing to say, but it matters. The grit on skin, the dampness in abandoned buildings, the way clothes hang heavier because everything is dirty and wet and nobody has a real place to wash. The way hair is tied back not for style, but for practicality. These details ground the romance. They keep it from floating off into fantasy. When they touch, you feel the grime and the cold and the reality. And that makes the tenderness feel more earned. There's also an interesting restraint in the way the show uses gore. It's not absent, but it's not indulgent. When violence happens, it's quick, messy, and emotionally consequential. The camera doesn't leer, it witnesses. And that tonal choice is consistent with the show's overall intention. The horror is not the blood. The horror is the choices people make because they're afraid. Now, I want to talk about the supporting cast without getting too specific about who does what. The drama populates its world with people who each embody a different survival philosophy. There are pragmatists, who believe feelings are a liability. There are idealists who believe saving one person is saving humanity. There are opportunists who see the outbreak as a chance to rise. And the show uses them like mirrors. Every time the couple meets someone new, you learn something about the couple. Not because they explain themselves, but because you watch them react. Who do they trust? Who do they manipulate? Who do they pity? Who do they fear? And that is where the writing gets really sharp. It understands that relationships reveal character more than monologues do. How he speaks about her when she's not present. How she looks at him when he's being ruthless. How they communicate silently when they disagree but can't argue openly. All of that is storytelling. Wait, because one of the most compelling questions the show keeps delaying is, what does she want independent of him? Not just, I want to be cured. Not just, I want us to be together. What does she want as a person who has been forcibly transformed? Does she want to be seen? Does she want to be safe? Does she want to stop being hidden? Does she want to risk being hated if it means being real? The drama hints at those desires in subtle ways. And I found myself leaning in for them, because those are the moments where the story becomes bigger than romance. It becomes about autonomy. The boyfriend, meanwhile, has to confront his own identity as the one who refuses to let her go. Because that identity can become a mask. It can become a way to avoid dealing with his own grief. Like, if he's always in motion, always searching, always fighting, he never has to sit still and feel the loss. Even though she's still there, there's still loss. There's loss of the old life. Loss of ease. Loss of the version of her that could walk in sunlight without fear. If he never acknowledges that, he's going to keep making decisions from a place of panic. And again, the show doesn't fix that neatly. It lets him be stuck. It lets him make the same mistake more than once. It lets him learn slowly, which, for some viewers, will feel frustrating. For me, it felt honest. People don't become wise because the script needs them to. People become wise because they've been humbled enough times that the old strategies stop working. There's a tonal bravery in making the central romance not just sweet but heavy. Their love is not light. It's not the kind of love that floats. It's the kind that drags you forward even when you're bleeding. And the show repeatedly visualizes that through movement. They're always walking, always carrying, always pulling each other out of danger. It's love as labor, love as work, love as a constant decision. And I'll be real, there were episodes where I wanted to grab both of them by the shoulders and go, take a nap, eat something, please. But that's part of the experience. You start to feel protective of them, which is exactly what the show wants. Because that protectiveness is how it makes you understand the boyfriend's mindset. When you're attached to someone's survival, you start justifying things too. Wait, because the drama's smart-ass trick is that it makes you question your own ethics without giving you the relief of certainty. You'll cheer for them to escape, and then realize their escape might mean someone else doesn't get to. You'll want them to lie, and then realize their lie could cost an innocent life. You'll want them to find the cure, and then realize the cure being real could ignite a whole new kind of violence. The show isn't just telling a story, it's testing you, quietly, patiently. Let's talk about despair again, but in a more specific emotional register. The despair here isn't everyone's dead. So who cares? It's everyone's alive. And they still choose cruelty. That hits different. Because it's not the apocalypse that breaks your faith in humanity, it's human behavior under pressure. And the show goes there. It shows people rationalizing, scapegoating, building little systems of control, using fear as permission. That's what makes the romance feel rebellious. Their tenderness becomes an act of defiance against a world that's trying to simplify everything into kill or be killed. And that's where the title starts to resonate. Never Shall Death Do Us Part isn't just romantic fluff. It's a challenge. It's a threat. It's them saying, even if you turn her into a category, even if you call her dead, I will not comply. That's powerful. And it's also tragic because the world is bigger than them. Now, one thing I don't want to gloss over. The show occasionally risks making the boyfriend's devotion feel like the only story that matters. And I had moments where I wanted the drama to give her even more interiority, even more space away from his gaze. It does give her a lot, to be fair. But because the premise is so anchored in his refusal to accept her death, the narrative gravity naturally tilts toward his perspective. When the show corrects for that, when it gives her a scene where she's alone with her thoughts, alone with her hunger, alone with her grief, it's electric. It reminds you she's not just the object of a quest. She's the protagonist of her own survival. Those scenes are also where the horror lands the hardest, because she's the one living the infection from the inside. The boyfriend's fear is externalized. He's scared of what might happen to her. She's living what is happening to her. When the show lets you sit with that, without dialogue, without rescue, it becomes something more haunting than any chase scene. Wait, because I want to talk about a moment of restraint that I think is one of the most important in the series, broadly speaking. The show repeatedly gives you opportunities for her to become the tragic sacrifice. That's such a common trope. Infected loved one chooses to die to save others. And while the drama flirts with that energy, it doesn't treat her death as the inevitable noble endpoint of her story. It treats her life as worth fighting for. That matters. Because we've seen so many stories where the infected person's only redemption is dying so the humans can feel clean. This show is like, no, what if the infected person is still a person, and their continued existence is the moral challenge? That's the kind of choice that feels like it came from someone who actually cares about what the genre implies. And still, the series doesn't give you an easy empowerment fantasy either. Her survival isn't triumphant. It's precarious. It's negotiated. It's a series of compromises. And that's where the despair part of the premise keeps paying off. Every time they inch closer to a cure, something ugly happens. Someone lies. Someone uses them. Someone forces a choice. And you can see the toll building like rust. There's also a thing the show does with time that I appreciate. It doesn't let you forget how long they've been running. Fatigue accumulates. Injuries don't vanish between scenes. Hair gets messier. Clothes get worse. Eyes get heavier. Even if we're not tracking days explicitly, you feel duration. That's rare in a genre that often treats travel like teleportation and trauma like decoration. Wait, because the longer the show goes, the more it becomes about whether love can survive becoming a strategy. When you're disguising someone, when you're lying to everyone, when every decision is weighed for risk, love starts to behave like a tactic. And the show asks, if love becomes a tactic, does it stay love? Or does it turn into something colder? That question sits in the space between them, especially when they disagree about what risks are worth taking. And their disagreements are where the acting really sings. The boyfriend tends to go quiet when he's losing an argument, like he's locking down emotionally. She tends to get sharper, not louder, but sharper, like she's cutting through his denial. And the show stages these arguments in cramped spaces because they can't afford privacy. Their fights are whispered. Their tears are swallowed. Their anger has to be contained because any noise can kill them. That constraint makes the emotion feel more intense, not less, because it has nowhere to go. There's a particular kind of romantic tragedy in watching two people love each other fiercely, while also slowly injuring each other with the weight of their situation. The show is brave enough to portray that. It doesn't turn their love into a flawless beacon. It turns it into a living thing under stress. Sometimes it grows. Sometimes it bruises. Sometimes it becomes unrecognizable. And then, somehow, it finds its shape again. I want to highlight the show's use of eye contact. I know that sounds basic, but it's not. It's specific. When she's around others, her gaze is trained downward, submissive almost, like she's trying not to be noticed. When she looks at him, her gaze lifts, and you see the old her. You see confidence. You see intimacy. When he looks at her, it's rarely casual. It's intense, searching, like he's constantly checking for loss. And the more the story progresses, the more that gaze becomes complicated. It holds fear, it holds guilt, it holds apology, it holds love that's starting to fray at the edges because it's carrying too much. Wait, because if you're still with me here, you're probably asking the same thing I kept asking. Is the cure even the right goal? Like, emotionally, philosophically. The show's most unsettling strength is that it makes cure feel ambiguous. Not because curing her would be bad, obviously, but because the pursuit of cure can become a justification for anything. We did it for the cure. We sacrificed them for the cure. We lied for the cure. And you can feel that slippery slope forming. The drama also plays with the idea that maybe the world doesn't deserve a cure, which is a harsh thought, but the show flirts with it in the way it portrays human cruelty. If people can't handle one lucid, infected woman existing without trying to kill her, what will they do with the power to bring people back? What will they do with that control? And that's where the show becomes less of a romance and more of a social horror story. There's a segment where the couple's path intersects with institutional thinking, people trying to rebuild order, people trying to create hierarchy again. And it's chilling because the show portrays how quickly humans recreate power structures. Even when the world ends, we still want someone on top, someone on bottom, someone to blame. The infection becomes the perfect excuse. It's biological destiny, they'll say. It's science, they'll say. It's necessary, they'll say. And the show is like, yeah, that's what people always say when they're trying to feel clean about cruelty. Now, I'll talk briefly about some flaws, because loving something doesn't mean pretending it's flawless. There are moments where certain side conflicts feel like they exist primarily to keep the couple moving, rather than because they organically arise. You can feel the story pushing them to the next location, the next lead, the next step toward the cure. And why that's normal in quest narratives, it can sometimes flatten the supporting characters into functions rather than people. When the show gives those characters complexity, it's great. When it doesn't, you feel the machinery. But when the central relationship is this strong, I'm willing to forgive a bit of quest mechanics. Because the real payoff isn't, do they get the cure? The payoff is, who do they become on the way there? Wait, because the show also builds toward a question about trust that becomes almost unbearable. If she is fully conscious, fully loving, fully herself, how long can she endure being treated like a secret? At what point does love become imprisonment? That's the kind of emotional bomb the series keeps placing gently on the table and then walking away from, letting it tick in the background. And the thing is, the show understands that secrets corrode intimacy. The boyfriend thinks he's protecting her by hiding her, and he is, in a physical sense. But the act of hiding changes how they relate. It forces her to defer. It forces him to control. It creates an imbalance that love alone can't erase. And the drama doesn't resolve that with one heartfelt conversation. It lets it simmer, because in real life, these imbalances don't disappear just because you name them. They need new behavior. They need time. And time is the one thing apocalypse narratives never have enough of. There's also a beautiful sadness in how the show portrays their memories of before. Not as nostalgia porn, but as something almost dangerous. Because remembering what you had makes what you have now feel crueler. You can see them hesitate before talking about the past, like it's a wound they don't want to poke. And when they do talk about it, it's not always comforting. Sometimes it's like twisting a knife. Sometimes it's like admitting defeat. Sometimes it's like keeping a candle lit in a storm. Wait, because the series keeps hinting that love might not be enough to preserve identity. Like, she loves him, but the infection still pulls. He loves her, but his fear still changes him. Love isn't a magic spell. It's a force, yes, but it's not omnipotent. And that's the show's most adult message, honestly. That you can love someone completely and still not be able to save them from everything. Sometimes not even from yourself. One thing I'll always remember is the way the show frames their hugs. They're not romanticized with sweeping music and soft focus. They're tight, urgent, almost desperate. like they're trying to merge bodies so the world can't get in between. Sometimes you can see her shoulders tense at first, like she's afraid she'll hurt him. Then she relaxes into it, and you can feel the relief. It's not awe, it's oh God. It's relief in the shape of a hug. And the boyfriend, when he holds her, doesn't hold her like she's fragile. He holds her like she's real, like she has weight, like she's here. That's such an important choice. Because if he held her like a porcelain doll, it would reinforce the idea that she's broken. Instead, he holds her like a person, and that physical acting becomes a statement. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid for you. There's a difference. Wait, because the show keeps setting up situations where he has to choose between being honest with others and being loyal to her. And those aren't the same thing. Loyalty can require lies. Honesty can require betrayal. The show explores that tension without making either choice feel clean. And it's in those messy, morally grey corners where the drama feels most alive. At this point in the series, I was also noticing how the show treats hope almost like a limited resource. Like, hope has to be protected the way you protect food. You can't waste it. You can't give it to everyone. Because if you give hope to the wrong person, they'll weaponize it. They'll turn it into a scam. They'll turn it into power. So the couple holds hope privately, like a secret. Which is tragic, because hope is supposed to be shared. But in this world, sharing hope can get you killed. The show's title also starts to feel less like a romantic vow and more like a curse. Because if death can't part them, then what can? Mistrust? Exhaustion? Compromise? The slow erosion of self? The drama keeps poking at that. It keeps testing them with scenarios that don't just threaten their bodies, but threaten their bones' structure. And this is where the series earns its emotional weight. It's not simply they love each other. It's they love each other. And love is costing them. That cost is the story. I'm going to mention something about the score again, because it does this subtle thing where it sometimes withholds emotional release. Like, in scenes where you expect a swelling cue, hug, confession, a moment of safety, the music stays sparse. You're left with raw sound. That choice prevents the show from becoming sentimental. It keeps the tenderness from feeling like a commercial for love. It feels like two people clinging to each other while the world creaks and groans around them. And then, when the music does swell, it often arrives after a loss, not after a win. It mourns. It doesn't celebrate. That's consistent. That's tonally intelligent. Wait, because there's an under-discussed element in this kind of story, disgust. Not just other people's disgust toward her, but her own potential disgust toward herself. The show hints at that in the way she avoids looking at her reflection, in the way she sometimes hesitates before letting him touch her, like she's asking herself, do I deserve this? And that's heartbreaking, because the infection doesn't just threaten her body, it threatens her self-worth. The world is telling her she's a monster. If she starts believing it, then the romance collapses from the inside. The boyfriend's role becomes, in many scenes, less about saving her physically and more about refusing to let her internalize the world's hatred. He's constantly affirming her humanity through action, through touch, through trust, through the way he speaks to her like she's still the same person. And in a lesser show, that could feel like cheesy validation. Here it feels like life support. And still, the show is careful not to make her dependent on his affirmation. It gives her moments where she asserts her own identity, where she makes a choice that isn't about him, where she draws a line. That balance is crucial. It keeps their love from becoming a savior narrative. Wait, because the series keeps circling one of the most painful truths. Sometimes the person you love can't love you the way you need, not because they don't care, but because they're drowning. He's drowning in fear. She's drowning in hunger and stigma. Their love is real, but their capacities are limited. And watching them bump into those limits is agonizing in the best possible way. It's not a fantasy. It's a relationship under siege. At a certain point, the show's world building starts to feel like it's closing in. Not necessarily through explicit maps or lore dumps, thankfully, but through repetition of certain social patterns. The same kind of fear, the same kind of scapegoating, the same kind of "we have rules here." And it becomes clear that the couple isn't just running from zombies. They're running from humanity's urge to simplify. No matter where they go, someone will want to categorize her. Someone will want to control her. Someone will want to use her as proof of something. And that's where the despair becomes existential. You start to wonder if there is anywhere they can exist without conflict. Even if they find a cure, will the world ever let them be ordinary again? The show doesn't answer that quickly, and I appreciate the restraint. It lets the question hang. Wait, because the real cliff in the middle of the story isn't an action cliff. It's an emotional one. It's when you realize the couple's love is no longer just them against the world. It's also them against the ways the world is changing them. And that's a fight you can't win with weapons. That's a fight you win or lose, one small choice at a time. And I think that's why I kept watching with my stomach in knots. Because I wasn't only worried about whether they'd survive the next threat. I was worried about whether they'd stay recognizable to each other. Whether the tenderness would survive the constant need for strategy. Whether the boy who held her without fear would still be there once he'd had to do too many terrible things in her name. Whether the girl who loved him with her mind intact would still be able to love him if his love started feeling like a cage. The show makes you care about those questions, which is the hardest thing a genre drama can do. Zombies are easy. Emotional continuity is hard. And this series, for all its bleakness, keeps choosing emotional continuity. It keeps treating feelings as plot. And just when you think you've adjusted to that rhythm, just when you're like, okay, I can handle the dread, I can handle the tenderness, I can handle the moral grey, the story starts daring you to consider something even worse than death. That they might get what they want, and it still won't save them. That they might get what they want, and it still won't save them. And when a show gets you to that thought honestly, not as a cheap gotcha, but as a genuine emotional forecast, that's when I know I'm locked in. Because it's one thing to fear death. It's another thing to fear transformation. The loss that happens while you're still here. And Never Shall Death Do Us Part keeps pointing at that second fear like, no, look at it. Don't blink. The story keeps inching forward with that cure dangling in front of them like a lantern in fog. And the farther they go, the more the drama starts showing you that finding a cure is not a single goal. It's a whole ecosystem of motives. Some people want a cure because they genuinely want to save lives. Some people want it because they want to control the future. Some people want it because they want to be forgiven for what they've done. And then there are people who don't want it at all, because a cure would complicate the clean, brutal rules they've been living by. That's such a nasty, believable human truth. Sometimes we resist solutions because we've already built our identity around the problem. And what I love is that the series doesn't present that as one big ideological debate with speeches. It makes it tactile. It makes it about rooms you're allowed into, supplies you're allowed to touch, information you're allowed to hear, bodies you're allowed to consider human. The politics are embodied. They're not just talked about. The cure becomes a way people decide who is worthy of safety. And you can feel the couple moving through a world where worthiness is constantly being evaluated like a price tag. There's a late-game shift in tone that feels like the walls closing in. Early on, the danger is often external and immediate. Get away. Don't get seen. Don't get caught. Don't get surrounded. Later, the danger starts to feel administrative, which is such a specific kind of horror. It's not the teeth anymore. It's the paperwork energy. The we have protocols energy. The for your own safety energy. And if you've ever been trapped in a system, medical, legal, bureaucratic, where your humanity gets reduced to a case file, you'll recognize the chill. The show makes that reduction feel just as threatening as a horde. Wait, because this is where the Roman starts carrying an even heavier burden. They're not just fighting for her survival, they're fighting for her definition. Fighting against a world trying to redefine her as a threat, a resource, a specimen, a cautionary tale. And the show asks, quietly but relentlessly, what do you do when love isn't just personal? It's political? When holding someone is an act of rebellion? There are sequences in the back half where you can feel the series deliberately slowing its breathing. Less running, more waiting. Less shouting, more listening. And I know, that sounds like I'm describing a different show than the one with zombies. But that's exactly why it works. Because the suspense becomes internal. You're waiting for her hunger to spike at the wrong moment. You're waiting for someone to notice the tiniest detail. You're waiting for him to choose honesty or protection. And the show keeps you there in that prolonged anticipation because it understands something. Dread is more intimate than fear. Fear is a jump. Dread is a residence. And the couple's relationship starts to change shape in that residence. It's not just us against the world anymore. It becomes us against our own coping mechanisms. He copes by controlling variables, by planning, by tightening his circle so nothing can touch her. She copes by shrinking her presence, by making herself easier to hide, easier to protect, easier to carry. And those coping strategies collide because what keeps you alive can still hurt you. One of the most affecting choices the show makes is how it treats her lucidity as a constant moral indictment. If she's conscious and loving, then every time someone calls her it's a small cruelty. Every time someone talks about putting her down, it's not abstract. It's murder talk in front of a person. And the show doesn't let you escape that discomfort by cutting away. It will hold on her face while she listens. Sometimes she looks numb, sometimes she looks furious, sometimes she looks weirdly calm like she's dissociating. And that range matters because it portrays trauma as variable. Not everyone reacts the same way every day. Sometimes you fight, sometimes you float. And the boyfriend's reactions in those moments are so layered. He'll keep his face neutral to avoid drawing attention, but you can see the rage vibrating behind his eyes. Then, later, when they're alone, the rage leaks out as a kind of frantic tenderness. Like he needs to touch her just to prove the world is wrong. And that's romantic, yes. But it also has this undertone of desperation that makes it hard to breathe, because you can tell he's using love as a counterspell against reality. Wait, because this is where the show's title stops being aspirational and becomes almost accusatory. Never shall death do us part. Okay, but what about fear? What about shame? What about the slow attrition of choices you can live with? What about the moment you realize you've become someone you don't recognize? The show keeps pushing the couple into those uncomfortable territories where staying together is not a simple virtue. It's a complicated act with collateral damage. A lot of zombie dramas treat the infected as a mass, a texture, a moving wall. Here, because the show has centered a single infected person who's still herself, the infected in the background take on a different emotional temperature. You start looking at them and wondering, were any of you like her? Are any of you still in there? And that thought is genuinely disturbing because it turns the usual genre catharsis into guilt. You're not watching monsters get mowed down with the same ease. You're watching bodies that might be prisons. The series doesn't overplay that idea, which is smart. It doesn't turn every zombie encounter into a philosophical crisis because that would be exhausting and also kind of self-important. But it does let the idea haunt the edges. It's like a faint ringing you only notice when the room gets quiet. And can we talk about how good the show is at quiet? Because it's not just that it uses silence. It uses the wrong kind of quiet. The kind where you can hear your own pulse. The kind where you realize you're listening harder than you should because you're hoping not to hear something. That's a specific sound design craft. And it's also a directing choice to trust stillness, to trust the actors' faces, to trust the audience to sit in discomfort without needing constant stimulation. Wait, because there's a payoff to that stillness later when the show does choose to go loud. When it breaks the quiet with sudden chaos, it hits harder because your nervous system has been living in a tense hush. The contrast is violent, and the show uses that contrast not just to startle you, but to make you feel how fragile their little pockets of peace are. One slam of a door, and the whole world rushes in. I want to spend some time on her arc, because I think it's easy to accidentally reduce her to a tragic infected girlfriend if you're not paying attention. But her arc is actually one of the most compelling explorations of identity I've seen in this type of genre story. She starts as someone who is being pursued and protected. Yes, but over time, you can feel her shifting from "I must survive for us" to "I must survive for me." Not in a selfish way, in a dignified way, in a way that says, "I am not a symbol. I am not a mission. I am not a test of your devotion. I'm a person living inside a body that the world hates, and I still get to have wants." And the show expresses those wants through tiny rebellions. Sometimes it's insisting on making a choice rather than being managed. Sometimes it's refusing to hide when hiding feels like humiliation. Sometimes it's pulling back emotionally when she senses that his love is drifting into ownership. The writing doesn't always make those moments loud. It doesn't always make them tidy. But it lets them exist. It lets her be complicated. And that's what makes her feel real. The boyfriend's arc is equally complicated. And it's where I think the show does some of its most difficult, most honest work. Because he starts from a place that looks heroic, refusing to accept her death, searching for her, holding her without fear. That's a beautiful image. But the show asks, what happens when heroism becomes identity? When "I'm the one who saves her" becomes the only thing you know how to be? That identity can become a trap, because it can make you prioritize saving over listening. It can make you view her as something to preserve rather than someone to collaborate with. And I appreciate that the show doesn't cancel him for that. It doesn't turn him into a villain. It treats him like a traumatized person whose love is both his strength and his blind spot. That's a human way to write a romantic lead. It's also a risky way, because some viewers just want a clean, unwavering hero. This drama says, no, if you love someone in a world like this, you're going to make ugly choices. You might even convince yourself you're doing it for them when you're really doing it for your own terror. Wait, because there's a moment, again, speaking generally, that crystallized this for me. A situation where he has to decide whether to reveal the truth to someone who could potentially help them. And you can see the calculation behind his eyes. Help is a risk. Trust is a risk. Letting someone see her is a risk. But keeping her hidden is also a risk. Not just physically, emotionally. And the actor plays that indecision so well. He looks like someone trying to solve an equation where every answer is a different kind of loss. The show's visual storytelling supports that psychological trap. There are repeated motifs of thresholds, doorways, gates, checkpoints, places you have to pass through where someone else controls access. That's not just world building, it's theme. Their love is always at a threshold, always needing permission, always needing to pass as acceptable. Even when they're alone, the camera often frames them as if they're being watched through a crack, which keeps the sense of surveillance alive even in intimacy. It's like the show is saying, you cannot fully relax in a world built to hunt you. And I need to talk about the way the show handles her passing as human as an emotional performance. Because it's exhausting to watch, in a good way, how carefully she has to regulate her body. It's not just don't bite. It's don't react wrong. Don't move too quickly. Don't stare too long. Don't breathe too strangely. Don't show hunger. Don't show fear. Don't show anger. And if you think about it, that's basically the emotional labor of living as someone who is not allowed to be fully yourself in public. The show makes that labor visible. Wait, because here's where the drama becomes less about zombies and more about intimacy under oppression. And that's why it keeps hitting. It's not only horror, it's social horror. It's the horror of being policed. The horror of being defined by other people's fear. The horror of needing to prove your harmlessness every day. There's also a very specific kind of tenderness the show keeps returning to. Him checking on her like she's human. Not like she's a patient. Not like she's an experiment. Like she's a person. Are you cold? Did you sleep? Are you okay? It's basic care. But in a world where she's being treated like a monster, basic care becomes radical. And the show frames that care as both beautiful and heartbreaking because it's a reminder of how little it takes to make someone feel human, and how often people refuse to offer even that. Now, I want to zoom out and talk about the show as a romance, because it's doing something that's actually kind of rare. It's not using romance as a break from the horror. It's using romance as the site of horror. Love is the place where the danger concentrates. That's what makes it intense. Because every time they're tender, you're not fully relaxed. You're aware of the risk. You're aware of the consequences. And that makes the romance feel adult. Not adult as in explicit. Adult as in morally complex, emotionally costly, psychologically layered. Wait, because the show also keeps asking, what does it mean to promise someone forever when you don't even have tomorrow? That question hangs over every quiet moment. It's there when they share food. It's there when they plan routes. It's there when they rest. You can feel them trying not to say goodbye preemptively, because saying goodbye feels like surrender, but not saying goodbye feels like denial. The show lives in that tension. One of the most impressive craft elements is how it uses pacing to mimic trauma. Trauma is not linear. It's spikes and numbness. It's hypervigilance and collapse. The series sometimes moves with frantic urgency and then suddenly slows, forcing you to sit with aftermath. And the aftermath is where the show is strongest. It doesn't just cut away after a scary event and move on. It lingers on the emotional residue, on the way a character's hands shake after they've stopped shaking, on the way someone stares into nothing after they've made it. It's that residue that makes the drama feel like it has a conscience. And the performances carry that residue. The boyfriend's face, in the later stretch, often looks like it's holding back tears he doesn't have time for. He doesn't cry because crying is time-consuming. Crying is loud. Crying is vulnerable. Instead, he swallows it. And that swallowing becomes a habit. You can see it in the way his throat moves, the way his jaw tightens. It's such a physical portrayal of suppressed emotion. And it makes the few moments when he does break, when he allows himself softness, feel like oxygen. Her performance, meanwhile, becomes more and more about endurance. Not endurance as stoicism. Endurance as constant negotiation with her own body. The show keeps letting you see how tired she is. Not just tired physically, tired existentially. The tiredness of being seen as a threat even when you're trying so hard to be safe. That tiredness is in her eyes. It's in the way she sometimes looks at the world with this flat, resigned expression, and then forces herself back into alertness because she can't afford to drift. Wait, because there's a moment late in the series, again, I'm speaking carefully, where she's confronted with the reality that even if she remains lucid, people might never trust her. And you can see something shift in her, not into villainy, into clarity. Like she stops trying to be forgiven by strangers. She starts focusing on what she can control, her choices, her boundaries, her love. That shift is empowering in a quiet way. It's not a triumphant montage. It's an internal decision. And I found that more moving than any big action beat. I'll admit I had one of those moments where I caught myself laughing at something small, like a character's exhausted reaction to yet another obstacle. And then immediately felt guilty for laughing because the world is on fire. And then I realized, that's exactly what the show is doing. It's portraying how humans laugh in horror because we need to. Because if we don't, we break. Wait, because that leads into another theme, emotional regulation. The show is essentially about people trying to regulate themselves under impossible conditions. He regulates by controlling. She regulates by restraining. Other characters regulate by moralizing, by scapegoating, by building rules, by clinging to ideology. It's all regulation. It's all coping. And some coping strategies are more destructive than others. Now, I want to talk about the seeking a cure through betrayal and despair aspect as a narrative engine. The Cure gives the plot a direction. Betrayal provides twists and tension. Despair provides emotional gravity. But what makes it work is that the show never lets those elements become purely mechanical. The Cure is always tied back to her body. Betrayal is always tied back to trust. Despair is always tied back to love. Everything keeps looping back to the relationship. That's the glue. Without that glue, this could have been just another apocalyptic chase story. Wait, because when the show does widen to show the world, other survivors, other groups, other moral systems, it's not just for world building. It's to reflect the couple's central conflict. Every group they encounter becomes a what if. What if you choose community over love? What if you choose rules over compassion? What if you choose pragmatism over hope? What if you choose hope over realism? The show uses these encounters to test the couple's priorities and to show the cost of those priorities. And I appreciate that it doesn't always make the couple's choice look right. Sometimes their choice looks selfish. Sometimes it looks brave. Sometimes it looks foolish. Sometimes it looks necessary. That ambiguity is what makes it feel like a real moral story instead of propaganda for romance. Now, let me give you one more vivid mini-scene retelling, because they're a kind of scene this show nails that I keep replaying in my head. It's one of those tense public space sequences where she has to pass as human. The atmosphere is thick with other people's breath. You can almost feel the stale air, the sweat, the fear disguised as normal conversation. There's a line of people, maybe waiting for something, resources, information, passage, who knows. And the couple is in it, trying to blend. The camera sits at shoulder height, squeezed between bodies. You hear murmurs, a cough, someone's nervous laugh. And then you hear it. Someone behind them says something about infected, not even directly accusing them. Just talking. Casual cruelty. Like infected are pests. Like infected are vermin. And the line is delivered with that easy confidence people have when they think the whole room agrees. The show cuts to her face, and she doesn't react like a monster. She reacts like a person being dehumanized in public. Her eyes flicker. Her jaw tightens. She swallows. And then she lowers her gaze, because reacting would be dangerous. That swallow is everything. It's humiliation. It's rage. It's grief. It's survival. All in one throat movement. Then the boyfriend subtly moves closer to her. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to let his shoulder brush hers. A tiny touch. A grounding touch. And she exhales. Barely. Like she's using his body as proof she's still real. That's the show at its best. That's horror as social experience, not just physical threat. That's romance as quiet resistance. Wait, because scenes like that are why I'm willing to forgive the show's occasional heavy-handedness. Because when it's subtle, it's devastating. Now, let's talk about the show's depiction of love as action. In a lot of romances, love is expressed through grand gestures or big speeches. Here, love is expressed through logistics, through planning routes, through rationing food, through cleaning wounds, through staying awake so the other can sleep, through lying convincingly, through making yourself smaller so the other can exist. It's not glamorous. It's not pretty. It's love as labor. And there's something deeply moving about that because it feels real. Love in crisis is rarely poetic. It's practical. It's messy. It's repetitive. And that repetition is important. The show doesn't treat their struggle as a one-off dramatic event. It treats it as a routine, a grind. That's what makes despair believable. It's not one tragic scene. It's 100 small, exhausting days. Wait, because the show also explores the concept of hope as a relational thing. Hope isn't just, I believe we'll find a cure. Hope is, I believe you're still you. Hope is, I believe we can keep loving each other without destroying each other. Hope is, I believe we can survive without losing our souls. Those hopes are harder to maintain than the plot hope of find cure. And the show focuses on those harder hopes. Now, I'm going to do one more contrarian take because I think it's worth saying I actually don't think the show's best scenes are the ones about the cure. I know, that sounds odd because the cure is the big quest. But the cure scenes, whenever the show leans into "we must get to the next lead," are sometimes the most familiar parts of the narrative. They're the parts that feel like genre machinery. The best scenes, to me, are the ones that would still work if you removed the cure entirely. The scenes where she's forced to choose restraint. The scenes where he's forced to choose trust. The scenes where they're alone and finally honest. The cure is the engine, but the relationship is the art. And I say that because it's a compliment. It means the show's emotional core is strong enough to carry itself even without plot fuel. That's rare. Wait, because that emotional core is also what makes the betrayals matter. Betrayal in a plot sense is interesting. Betrayal in a relationship sense is devastating. And the show uses betrayal to test not just alliances, but the couple's ability to keep trusting each other when the world keeps proving trust is dangerous. There's also a subtle exploration of what it means to be protected. The boyfriend protects her physically, yes, but protection can become confinement. It can become a denial of agency. And the show allows that tension to exist without turning it into a simplistic protective men bad message. It understands that protection can come from love and still cause harm. It's a tragedy of good intentions. Her responses to that protection are nuanced too. She's grateful. She's frustrated. She's ashamed sometimes. She's relieved. She's angry. And the show lets those emotions coexist. It doesn't force her into one consistent reaction for the sake of clarity. That inconsistency is what makes her feel human. Wait, because the show is also about dignity. Dignity in the face of being hunted. Dignity in the face of being hidden. Dignity in the face of hunger. Dignity in the face of other people's fear. And the romance becomes, at times, a negotiation of dignity. Can she maintain it while being disguised? Can he honor it while protecting her? Can their love be a place where she's not reduced? One of the most heartbreaking things in the later stretch is the way the show portrays her trying not to be a burden. That's such a human impulse. When you're in crisis, when you're dependent, you start measuring your worth by how much you cost others. And the show lets you see her doing that math. It's in the way she offers to separate, in the way she minimizes her needs, in the way she pushes herself to endure silently. And as a viewer, you want to reach through the screen and say, you don't have to earn your right to be loved. But the world keeps telling her she does. And that's the tragedy. Wait, because that's also what makes the boyfriend's tenderness so essential. It counters that math. It says, no, you are not a cost. You are a person. But then his fear and his control sometimes reinforce the math again, unintentionally. The push and pull is painful to watch because it's so believable. Now, I'm going to talk about the show's final stretch in a way that stays spoiler safe, but still gives you an honest sense of how it feels. The last portion of the drama ramps up the pressure around the cure, and it uses that ramp to force the characters into decisions that reveal their deepest values. It's less about new information and more about consequences. The series stops asking what will happen and starts asking what will you do now that it's happening? That shift is what makes the ending feel weighty rather than twisty. There are confrontations. There are moments where trust is tested. There are scenes where characters have to choose between competing forms of love, romantic love, communal love, moral love. The show doesn't give you the satisfaction of a clean moral victory. It gives you something more honest. People doing their best, failing, trying again, and carrying scars. Wait, because the show's emotional climax isn't a jump scare. It's an acceptance. Not necessarily acceptance of defeat, don't get me wrong, but acceptance of reality. Acceptance of what they can control and what they can't. Acceptance that love can be real and still not be omnipotent. And that's why, when you reach the end, you don't feel like you watched a clever plot. You feel like you watched two people survive a storm and come out changed. I want to shout out the way the show uses faces in those late scenes. It doesn't rely on dialogue to tell you what the characters are deciding. It lets you watch them decide. You see the thought. You see the fear. You see the moment a choice locks in. That's a director trusting the actor and an actor delivering. The boyfriend's actor, in particular, has this ability to look like he's holding back a scream without moving his mouth. It's all eyes, all tension. He looks like someone whose entire body has been trained to stay quiet, to not attract attention, to not collapse. And the moments where he almost collapses are the ones that will stay with me. Her actor, in the endgame, carries this incredible mixture of softness and steel. She can look fragile and then, in the next breath, look terrifyingly resolute. And that's exactly what the character requires. She's not a monster, but she's not helpless either. She's someone whose survival has demanded a kind of strength that most humans never have to develop. The performance honors that. Wait, because this is where I want to acknowledge how hard it is to portray infected but conscious without sliding into melodrama. The show avoids that by grounding everything in specifics. Hunger as an embodied sensation, passing as a social performance, love as labor, fear as a physical habit. It doesn't rely on big speeches about being human. It shows what being human costs her. Now, let's talk about the cinematography and color again, because the show's visual arc mirrors the emotional arc. Early on, the world feels raw and immediate. More handheld energy, more frantic movement, more harshness. Later, the visual style starts to feel more composed, not because the world becomes safer, but because the story becomes more about choice than chaos. The camera steadies when characters are forced to confront their values. It steadies when the drama wants you to feel the weight of a moment rather than the adrenaline of survival. That compositional steadiness gives the later scenes a kind of inevitability. Like the story is no longer running, it's arriving, and the use of light becomes more symbolic. You get these moments where light falls on her face in a way that makes her look almost normal, almost like she could belong in a peaceful world again. And then the show will cut to a harsher angle, a more shadowed look, reminding you, the world isn't peaceful. It's like the show is letting you glimpse what could be, and then snapping it away. It's cruel, but it's effective. Wait, because cruelty is part of the show's design. Not cruelty for fun. Cruelty as a way to test tenderness. The show is basically a laboratory for love. It puts love under pressure and watches what happens. And what happens is messy, complicated, and deeply human. Sound design in the final stretch becomes almost minimalist. You hear breathing. You hear fabric. You hear the subtle mechanical sounds of survival. And when louder sounds appear, shouts, fighting, chaos, they feel like intrusions. It's like the show has trained you to treat quiet as intimacy and noise as threat. That training pays off because it means the endgame can hit you emotionally without needing constant action. A quiet moment can feel like a climax. Wait, because one of the most devastating emotional beats in the later part is simply them being tired. Not dramatic tired, bone tired. The kind of tired where your voice changes, where your eyes stop shining, where you can't even summon panic anymore, just grim focus. The show portrays that fatigue with respect. It doesn't glamorize it. It lets it be ugly. There's also a subtle shift in how they touch each other. Early on, touch is urgent and validating. Proof of life, proof of love. Later, touch becomes more careful, more weighted, less frantic. Like they've learned that touch can't fix everything, but it can still comfort. It becomes less about proving and more about soothing. That evolution is beautiful. Wait, because that evolution is also what makes the romance feel like it has time. Even in a story that's constantly moving, the relationship evolves. It changes. It deepens. It frays and repairs. That's what romance should do. It shouldn't just remain in the same emotional gear. Now, I'm going to address the moderate spoilers promise again in spirit. I won't tell you the specifics of the ending, and I won't tell you exactly how the cure thread resolves. But I can tell you this, the show doesn't betray its themes. It stays true to what it's been asking all along. It doesn't suddenly turn into a different moral story just to shock you. It pays off the emotional questions it has raised about love and identity, about autonomy and protection, about stigma and humanity, about what it means to survive together. Wait, because that's the most satisfying thing about it. Even when it hurts you, it feels honest. And yes, it does hurt. There are moments where the show leans into despair in a way that will test your patience and your heart. If you're the type of viewer who needs a lot of relief, who wants your zombie stories more action-forward and less emotionally intense, you might find this draining. This is not a casual background watch. This is a sit-forward show. It demands attention. It demands emotional participation. It asks you to care, and then it charges you for caring. But for me, that's exactly why I loved it. I want dramas that make me feel like my attention matters, like my empathy matters, like the story is not just content, it's an experience. Wait, because there's one more thing the show does that I think is genuinely brave. It refuses to romanticize the idea that love is always selfless. Love can be selfish. Love can be desperate. Love can be possessive. Love can be used as an excuse. Love can be the reason you do something unforgivable. And the show looks at that without sneering at love. It doesn't become cynical. It becomes honest. It says love is powerful. But power is not automatically good. That's a hard balance to strike. Many shows either sanctify love or condemn it. This one treats it as a force that can save you and ruin you, sometimes in the same scene. Now, I want to highlight something about the show's overall message that I found strangely comforting, even though it's bleak. It suggests that humanity is not a category you either have or lose. Humanity is a practice. It's something you do. It's something you choose. Even when your body changes. Even when the world collapses. Even when other people deny you. Humanity lives in restraint, in care, in recognition, in refusing to dehumanize others even when it's convenient. And the couple, flawed as they are, keep practicing humanity. Sometimes imperfectly, sometimes selfishly, sometimes desperately. But they keep trying. And that trying is what makes them worth watching. Wait, because this is where I land on my verdict. And I'll say it plainly. I loved Never Shall Death Do Us Part. I loved it because it's romantic without being naive, horrific without being exploitative, and bleak without being nihilistic. It made me tense, it made me angry, it made me ache, and it made me think about the kinds of love we praise versus the kinds of love we actually live. If you're a newcomer and you're wondering whether to jump in, here's what you should know. If you want a zombie drama that prioritizes character psychology and relationship tension over constant action, this is absolutely for you. If you like stories where the horror is not just the creatures, but the social consequences, the stigma, the fear, the systems people build to feel safe, this show will feed you. If you're someone who responds to love stories that are messy, compromised, and still sincere, you're going to be locked in. If you should skip it, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. If you're craving a brisk, plot-first, set-piece-heavy zombie ride, you may find this slow in places. If you don't enjoy watching characters make morally great choices for love, if that frustrates you more than it intrigues you, you might bounce off it. And if you're in a tender place emotionally, if you're not up for a story that sits with grief and identity loss and the exhaustion of survival, maybe save it for when you've got the bandwidth. For everyone else, I think this is one of the rare genre romances that actually understands what it's doing. It uses zombies to tell a story about recognition, about autonomy, about the violence of being categorized, and about the stubborn, sometimes dangerous beauty of refusing to let the world define the person you love. If you've seen Never Shall Death Do Us Part, tell me what scene got you the most. Not the biggest action moment. The one that made you feel something you weren't expecting to feel. And if you're new here at Flick Flare, you can like the video if this kind of deep dive is your thing. And subscribe if you want more long-form drama talk that doesn't rush past the emotions. Because honestly, when a show can make me believe in a love that survives a literal death category, I don't forget it. And I don't want you to forget it either.